Welcome guys to my YouTube channel Make in Ncert. So today we are going to study chapter 7 of class 6 history Ncert book. The name of the chapter is From a Kingdom to an Empire. Uh, let's just see the first story. Roshan's rupees. Roshan's clutched the crisp notes that her grandfather had given to her on her birthday while she badly wanted to buy a new CD. She also wanted to just see and feel the brand new notes. It was then that she noticed that all of them had a smiling face of Gandhiji printed on the right and a tiny set of lions on the left. What were the lions there for? She wondered. So in this story, we can see that a child is amazed at the picture of Gandhiji on the Indian currency and also uh, the picture of the lion capital. So we will see the significance and learn the history behind all these in this chapter. So let's start. The lions that we see on our notes and coins have a long history. They were carved in stone and placed on top of a massive stone pillar at Sarnath. So guys, here in the picture you can see that this is the lion capital that we see on our currency coins and notes. So this was actually the top of a very large pillar, and the pillar was situated at Sarnath. Ashoka was one of the greatest rulers known to history, and his inscriptions were inscribed on the pillars as well as on rock surfaces. So we see that guys, Ashoka, as you know, was a very important ruler in Indian history. Ashoka belonged to the Mauryan dynasty, and he extended the Mauryan kingdom to be perhaps the largest kingdom in Indian history. And we see that several of the Ashokan inscriptions are quite famous. As we know that inscriptions are messages that are written on a stone or rock surface. We see that these pillars that Ashoka built, the lion capital is also a pillar that was built by Ashoka, and on these pillars he at many times wrote his inscriptions or his instruction or messages that were printed on these inscriptions. Before we find out what was written in these inscriptions, let us see why his kingdom was called an empire. So as we know that kingdoms, they grew from the Janpads to the Mahajanpads. Mahajanpads were medium-sized kingdom, and when these small to medium-sized kingdoms grew at a very large extent and covered a very large area, then these kingdoms were known as an empire. The empire that Ashoka ruled was founded by his grandfather, that is Chandragupta Maurya. More than 2300 years ago, Chandragupta was supported by a wise man named Chanakya or Kautilya. Many of Chanakya's ideas were written down in a book called Arthashastra. So guys, as you know that Ashoka is the important ruler of the Mauryan dynasty, and this Mauryan dynasty, it was founded by the grandfather of Ashok, that is Chandragupta Maurya. Chandragupta Maurya was during the time of when Alexander the Great invaded India. So during that time, Chandragupta Maurya overthrew the then Nanda ruler of Magad kingdom, that was Dhananand, and he overthrew Dhananand and established the Mauryan dynasty. Now, Chandragupta did not achieve this all alone. He was supported by a very learned person whose thinking is quite famous in Indian history. His name is Chanakya or Kautilya. Uh, as we see that the ideas and the thoughts of Chanakya are written down in a very famous book known as Arthashastra. It's a book that deals in many aspects, mainly the economics and governance of a state, how to run and rule a state on different aspects of a ruler and so on. So in this box, we can see it explains what is a dynasty. When members of the same family become rulers after one another, the family is often called a dynasty. The Mauryas were a dynasty with three important rulers: Chandragupta, his son Bindusara, and his Bindusara's son Ashoka. So we see that, guys, when the rulership of a kingdom or an empire is passed down from father to son in the same family, that family becomes the ruling dynasty. That family is the dynasty that rules the kingdom or an empire. So in the case of the Mauryan Empire, it was the it was Chandragupta who was the first ruler, then his son Bindusara, and later Bindusara's son Ashoka. So they established the Mauryan dynasty. There were several cities in the empire marked with black dots on the map. These included the capital Pataliputra, Takshila, Ujjain. Takshila was the gateway to the northwest, including Central Asia, while Ujjain lay on the route from north to South India. Merchants, officials, and craftspersons probably lived in these cities. So guys, we can see that if we look at map 5, the Mauryan Empire showing the principal cities and some places where the inscriptions were found. So in this map, we see the major cities and the places where Ashokan inscriptions have been found are located. So the red dots, as you can see, these represents the places where Ashokan inscription are found, and the black dots are important cities. So let me just first explain this part, that in this paragraph it says that the capital of the Mauryan Empire was Pataliputra. So if you look at the map, here is Pataliputra, and then another city that is known as Takshila. Takshila was located to the northwest. It was the capital of the Gandhara region. This area was known as Gandhara, and Takshila was capital of this region. It was also known as the gateway to the northwest. So from this city, all the areas of the northwest were connected to the Mauryan Empire. So people used to come from and go to the northern areas of Central Asia and towards the west from this city. And as a result, guys, we will read in history that there is a form of art known as the Gandhara sculpture or Gandhara architecture. So this form of art or sculpture has a lot of influence of the Greek influence, because as you know that during the time of Alexander the Great's invasion, a lot of Greek soldiers who came with him settled down in these northwestern areas, and over the years we see that the soldiers who settled down over in this land and their successors, they slowly Indianized, and they contributed to the local architecture and sculpture style with the Greek heritage that they had brought from their homes. So this Gandhara architecture, it is a mix of the local Indian Asian style of sculpture making and architecture, with also with several similarities with the Greek style of sculpture making. So then we see another city mentioned, that is Ujjain. So if we look at the map, here is Ujjain located. So in ancient times there used to be a road that connected northern and southern India. This was known as the Dakshinapath. So people used to travel from north south and south north via this route, and Ujjain was the important trading and urban center that coincided along this route. So and also guys, if we look at the map, we will see that the Ashokan inscription have been found all over India and even in Pakistan and even in Afghanistan. So this is quite significant that these the the vast extent of these inscription, it basically tells us the extent of the empire or the area of influence that Ashoka sort of controlled. So you can see that this area is quite large, and this is perhaps the largest empire that ever existed in Indian history. And so we can see that all these inscriptions, they are from different areas. Some in northwest, some are in South India, some are in the west. So this also marks the extent of the Mauryan Empire. So let's continue. Um, in other areas, there were villages of farmers and herders. In some areas of central India, there were forests where people gathered forest produce, hunted animals for food. People in different parts of the empire spoke in different languages. So naturally guys, the empire is quite diverse, and people used to have different occupations in different parts of the empire. Some were farmers, some were nomadic herders, and some were hunter gatherers and so on. And also due to the vast difference in area, the language that was spoken in different parts of the empire was also quite varied. So let's see. Also guys, another important fact, that we can see that all these inscriptions that are found are written in some cases in multiple languages that were usually spoken at that particular place where this inscription have been found. Suppose this inscription at Sopara will be written in the language that was spoken over here, and the inscription at Kandahar would be written in the language that was spoken over here. And sometimes we see even the inscriptions being written in two languages if language speakers of different languages used to reside in that area. So inscriptions were written in two or more languages. um, they probably ate different kinds of food and wore different kinds of clothes as well. So naturally guys, the food across the empire and the clothing was also quite varied. How are empires different from kingdoms? So this is quite important guys. Emperors need more resources than kings because empires are larger than kingdoms and need to be protected by big armies. So also they need a large number of officials who collect taxes. So we can see that basically, as you have read in the case of kingdoms, there was a system of different taxes that was levied on different kinds of activities. And but in the case of an empire, that is naturally a lot bigger in size, so a lot more resources would be required to run an empire as compared to a kingdom. So like more taxation would be needed for a better and a stronger administration of the empire, and larger resources would be needed to maintain a larger army to protect the vast areas of the empire. And so they also needed a lot more officials who can go to the different parts and collect taxes. Ruling the empire. As the empire was so large, different parts were ruled differently. The area around Pataliputra was under the direct control of the emperor. This meant that officials were appointed to collect taxes from farmers, herders, craftspersons, and traders who lived in the villages and towns in the areas. Officials also punished those who disobeyed the ruler's orders. Many of these officials were given salaries. Messengers went to and fro, and spies kept a watch on the officials. And of course, the emperor supervised them all with the help of members of royal family and senior ministers. So we see that in this paragraph, the basics of the administration of an empire is explained. That is, different parts of the empire were ruled in a different manner. The area, starting with the area around Pataliputra, that was the capital of the Mauryan Empire. It was under the direct control of the emperor. So the emperor used to appoint different officials who used to collect taxes from the farmers, herders and the craftsperson and the other common people. And these officials used to go around villages and towns in this area and used to collect the taxes. Also, these officials were paid and they were given salaries, and there was a strong spy network also who used to keep a watch on all these officials to make sure that they did their duty properly and were not involved in any sort of malpractice. So the emperor used to manage all these with the help of his close family members and also with senior ministers. Then there were other areas or provinces. Each that of these was ruled from a provincial capital, such as Takshila or Ujjain. Although there were some amount of control from Pataliputra, the royal princes were often sent as governors. Local customs and rules were probably followed. Besides, there were vast areas between these centers. Here, the Mauryas tried to control roads and rivers, which were important for transport, and collect whatever resources were available as tax and tribute. For example, the Arthashastra tells us that the northwest was an important for blankets and South India for its gold and precious stones. It is possible that these resources were collected as tribute. So we see that other than the region that was around the capital Pataliputra, the other far flung areas of the empire were governed through provincial governors. Now, each of these provinces had a provincial capital. Now, we read about Takshila and Ujjain. So, these were Takshila was also the capital of the Gandhara region, as we saw. Now, Ujjain was also the capital of the central and southern region. So we see that these provincial governors, they used to rule the area from these capitals, and other than the overall control of the emperor from the capital Pataliputra, these governors were more or less independent to run their region according to how they saw, but keeping under the rules of the emperor. And also the local customs of these regions were also given importance and followed by the provincial governors, so as to appease the people of the far provinces and reduce any chance of rebellion or a revolt against the empire. In many cases that we see that royal princes that we see of the same family as the emperor were sent as provincial governors. Uh, this was done because firstly it ensured that the provincial governor did not declare independence or revolt. That is, it ensured to a certain extent that the governors were loyal to the emperor. Of course, in many cases, the family members did revolt and fight against their own family, but it's more secure than appointing a stranger to such a high position. Next, we see that other than the provincial capitals in the other hinterlands of the empire, the Mauryas, they controlled the roads and the rivers. These were the means of transport and communication that linked the different parts of the empire. So they used to control these and collect whatever resources they could find from these regions. That is, uh, as is given in the Arthashastra, we get to know that the northwest was quite important for its blankets. So we know that the northwestern region is quite cold, and from different types of animal fur and fibers, different types of blankets are also made there. So it was quite precious for blankets, and South India was known for its gold and precious stones. it is possible that resources was collected as tribute, because sometimes other than the regular taxes that we have learned about, people also used to give tribute, that was a sort of a donation to the provincial rulers, and through the provincial rulers to the emperor. So we see the definition of tribute is given, that is, unlike taxes which was collected on a regular basis, tribute was collected as and when it was possible from people who gave a variety of things more or less willingly. So we see that taxes were a sort of a regular fee that the people had to pay, whereas tribute was more like a donation that depended upon the people. There were also forested regions. People living in these areas were more or less independent, but they may have been expected to provide elephants, timber, honey, wax to the Mauryan officials. So we see that in the forested areas, that were in those times, there were a lot of dense forests throughout India. So in those areas, the people who used to live there, they were primarily hunter-gatherers and forest tribes. So they were more or less independent, but they still came under the empire, and they were expected to provide the Mauryan officials with forest produce. That was different kinds of herbs, trees, medicines, plants, and most importantly, with the elephants, which were used in the army. The emperor and the capital city. So we see here that Megasthenes was an ambassador who was sent to the court of Chandragupta by the Greek ruler of West Asia, Seleucus Nicator. Megasthenes wrote an account about what he saw here, and here is a part of his description. So we know that Megasthenes, who was an ambassador of Seleucus Nicator. So Seleucus Nicator was one of the generals of Alexander the Great. So after the death of Alexander the Great, uh, these guys were sort of independent rulers who carved out their own provinces throughout the empire of Alexander the Great. So Seleucus Nicator, he founded the Seleucids dynasty, that was primarily ruling in uh, the Iran, Iraq, West Asia, and all these areas. They had their main foothold. Also, there was the Ptolemaic dynasty who was ruling in Egypt, and there was another guy who was in charge of the areas of Greece that were the homeland of Alexander the Great. So, in this way, all the generals of Alexander, they divided the empire of Alexander the Great between themselves. So, Seleucus Nicator, he was the ruler of the Middle Eastern areas of Alexander the Great. So, he sent the ambassador Megasthenes to the court of Chandragupta Maurya, who was the founder of the Mauryan dynasty. So, here is what he saw about the capital city Pataliputra. The occasions on which the emperor appears in the public are celebrated with grand royal processions. He is carried on a golden palanquin. His guards ride elephants decorated with gold and silver. Some of the guards carry trees on which live birds, including a flock of trained parrots, circle about the head of the emperor. The king is normally surrounded by armed women. He is afraid that someone may try to kill him. He has special servants to taste the food before he eats. He never sleeps in the same bedroom for 2 nights. So we can see that from the description, we see that here he talks about the royal and the grandeur processions of the royal king, that he was carried in a golden palanquin, that was a sort of a stand on top of elephants, or that was carried by people from both sides, a sort of a seat, and the elephants were decorated with gold and silver uh, during the royal procession, and they also there was women armed guards, women who were trained in fighting. They also were acted as guards to the emperor, And here is a special incidence of a flock of trained parrots who used to circle around the emperor's head. And it also says that the emperor was quite afraid that someone might kill him, so he used to have a guy who used to taste the food that he ate before the emperor tasted it, and he used to change his bedrooms quite often. So all these we see that these are the safety measures that the emperor followed, and also that we see that the grand image or the royal image that the emperor left in the mind of the spectators, and in this case that was Megasthenes. And about Pataliputra, modern Patna. So we know that Pataliputra is today known as Patna. He wrote that this is a large and beautiful city. It is surrounded by a massive wall. So as we have read in the previous chapter that the capital of Mahajanpads were surrounded by massive walls. So it has 570 towers and 64 gates. The houses of 2 and 3 stories are built of wood and mud brick. The king's palace is also wood with decorated with stone carvings. It is surrounded with gardens and enclosures for keeping birds. So we see that the walls that were present around the capital city of Pataliputra had lot of towers and a new number of gates, and there were also multi-storied buildings that were present in the city, and all these buildings, including the royal palaces, were mainly made of um, in case of the common people, they were mud and wood, and in the case of the royal palaces, they were with wood and also included stone carvings. So why do you think that this king had the special servants to taste food that the food that he ate? In what ways the Pataliputra different from Mohenjo-daro? So first of all, for this one, guys, this question, we see that the king was an important figure and his life was at risk at all the times. So anyone might have tried to assassinate him or try to usurp power from the current ruler. So as a security measure, they used to have people who used to taste the food that was served to the king before the king ate it. And for the next question, Pataliputra was different from Mohenjo-daro because, first of all, Pataliputra was a city of a later date, and Mohenjo-daro was from the time of Indus Valley civilization. And then we see that there are much more taller walls around the cities, and it was a lot bigger and fortified with a lot of towers and more number of gates. And also the houses that we see are more complex as compared to Mohenjo-daro. So in that way, I'm not sure if the grid pattern of the city was implemented in Pataliputra, but there was, as you know, due to the drains that were passing along the side of the roads, these were covered drains. Uh, so these almost created a sort of a grid pattern along the whole of the city. That was the smaller drains used to meet the larger drains in the bigger roads. So this was there. You can look it up about more differences between the two cities. Next we see Ashoka, an unique ruler. The most famous Mauryan ruler was Ashoka. He was the first ruler who tried to take his message to the people through inscriptions. Most of Ashoka's inscriptions were in Prakrit and were written in the Brahmi script. So we see that whenever we speak about the Mauryan Empire, the first ruler that comes to our mind is Ashoka, because he was one of the most famous ruler of the Mauryan dynasty as well as in whole of Indian history and world history too. So he tried to make his message of Dhamma, that we will read about Dhamma in the next sections. He tried to teach the message of Dhamma to his people who used to live in his kingdoms through the use of inscriptions. The inscriptions were carved out on the stone pillars on a surface of rocks. So these were scattered throughout his kingdoms. and these were written in the local language of the region so that the common people could easily understand his message. And as we see that most of the inscription were in Prakrit, that we see the language of the common people, and these were written using the Brahmi script. So Brahmi script is the script in which the Indian languages are written, and in some places, that is in one of the place, the Kharosthi script is also used. It was probably an inscription in the northwest of the empire, where the message was same message was written in two languages, that is in Greek and Aramaic, so that all the inhabitants of the area could easily understand and read it. Ashoka's war in Kalinga. Now, as you know that Kalinga war, you have heard, and we will read about it in this section. Kalinga is the ancient name of coastal Orissa. So you can see map 5. That is this part that is marked over here. This is Kalinga area. That we see the present day Orissa and Andhra Pradesh, this area. Sorry for that, guys. So let's continue. Ashoka fought a war to conquer Kalinga. However, he was so horrified with what he saw, the violence and the bloodshed, that he decided not to fight any more wars. He is the only king in the history of the world to have gave up conquest after winning a war. So we see that this is quite important because Ashoka's war in Kalinga changed his perspective on life as well as on how to rule a state and warfare in many ways. So that is, Kalinga was the ancient name of coastal Orissa, and when Ashoka invaded Kalinga, he fought a very vicious war to conquer the land. And although he was able to win the war, the cost was so high that it horrified Ashoka to a great extent. Ashoka was very taken aback with the violence and bloodshed that he witnessed during the war, and thus he finally decided to give up fighting wars. So he is the only king in world history to have given up conquest after winning a war. That he had given up conquest through violence, but he continued that his conquest through the spread of his dhamma. Dhamma basically is the Buddhist influenced policies that were implemented by Ashoka after the Kalinga War. These were peaceful and non-violent policies to run and guide the people of his empire. So he gave up the conquest through violence, but he continued the conquest through Dhamma. So also, guys, this thing that him giving up violence, we get to know about this from the Ashokan inscription, but we still do not know that whether he really gave up the army, like every army or armed unit in his empire, and just banished sort of any armed conflicts. But we see that we get to know about this from the inscriptions that we have found, and for now it is believed that yet he had maintained the army after the Kalinga war, but he did not use it in an aggressive way anymore. So let's continue. Ashoka's inscription describing the Kalinga war. This is the Ashoka's inscription. So this is what Ashoka declared in one of his inscriptions. So we will read the text that was found in one of the inscriptions. 8 years after becoming king, I conquered Kalinga. So this is quite important. So from this line, we can sort of get the idea of the time of the Kalinga war. That is, if we know the timing when Ashoka became king, So 8 years after that, there was the Kalinga War. After the coronation of Ashoka. So 8 years after coronation of Ashoka, there was the Kalinga War. About 1.5 lakh people were captured. So we see here that the amount of people taken captives is also given, and more than 1 lakh people were killed. So also the people who were killed is also given. This fills me with sorrow. Why? Whenever an independent land is conquered, lakhs of people die and many are taken prisoners. Brahmins and monks also die. People who are kind to their relatives and friends, to their slaves and servants, die and lose their loved ones. This is why I am sad and have decided to observe Dhamma and to teach others about it as well. So from this we can see that there is a change in heart of Ashoka, and he is moved by the violence that he witnesses during the war, and he decides to preach and follow the path of Dhamma and also teach about Dhamma to others. I believe that winning people over through Dhamma is much better than conquering them through force. Uh, so just now we talked about this part, that is, he gave up conquest through war, uh, and started the conquest through Dhamma. So we see that conquest through Dhamma was given more importance and conquest through war was given up. I am inscribing this message for futures, so that my son and grandson after me should not think about war. Instead, they should try to think about how to spread Dhamma. How did the Kalinga war bring about a change in Ashoka's attitude towards war? Dhamma is the Prakrit word for the Sanskrit term Dharma. So we see that Dhamma was the sort of you can say a local pronunciation, that is a Prakrit word for the Sanskrit term that is Dharma. That is, Dharma is duty, that we can translate to sort of duty. Then it was Dhamma was the Prakrit translation of Dharma. And the Kalinga War, as we saw that the violence of the Kalinga War, it caused a change of heart in Ashoka towards Dhamma. What was Ashoka's Dhamma? So in this part we will particularly learn about Ashoka's Dhamma. Before we do that, let us look at this picture, that is, it is known as the Ram Purba bull. Uh, if we have seen videos of the Rashtrapati Bhavan, we would have noticed that during in front of its main entrance, that is the main entrance to the building, this statue is situated, and this is of the modern times, and it is known as the Purba bull. Now Ram Purva was also marked in this map, that is, we can see it is located over here near the India and Nepal border. Now this bull was found in that area. It is now placed in the Rashtrapati Bhavan. So let's continue, guys. Ashoka's Dhamma did not involve worship of a god or performance of a sacrifice. So we see that Dhamma, although it was a translation of Dharma, some could translate Dharma as in today's use. We can translate it as a religion, but it is mainly Dharma. It means that is duty. So Ashoka's Dhamma did not involve worship of gods or any special sacrifice. He felt that just as father tries to teach his children, he had a duty to instruct his subjects. So he wanted to teach his subjects about Dhamma, just like a father teaches his child. He was also inspired by the teachings of the Buddha. So we see that the Dhamma and the principles of Ashoka are largely influenced by Buddhism. Buddhism has had a great impact on Ashoka. There were a number of problems that troubled him. People in the empire followed different religions. and sometimes that led to conflict. So we see that this is quite important line, that as the modern empire was as big as the modern day India, so we see that the people in different parts, they had different religious and different customs, cultural practices, and so on. And all these differences led to conflict, and it was quite hard to keep the empire together. Animals were sacrificed, and slaves and servants were ill-treated. Besides, there was quarrels in families and amongst neighbors. Ashoka felt that his duty was to solve these problems, so he appointed officials known as Dhamma Mahamattas, who went from place to place teaching people about Dhamma. So, guys, we can see here that Ashoka appointed special officials who were known as Dhamma Mahamattas. So, also this word Mahamattas is also a Prakrit form of Mahamantri. So that we see that Mahamatta is sort of the Prakrit translation of Mahamantri, we can say. So the Dharma Mahamantri or the Dhamma Mahamattas, these were officials who went from place to place teaching people about the principles of Ashoka's Dhamma. So these people taught the people about Dhamma, and also kept vigilance that all the principles were followed in different parts of the empire. So Dhamma was mainly spread to counter all the problems that we read in this paragraph. All these problems were uh, solved by Ashoka, or a solution to these problems was given by Ashoka in the form of his Dhamma. Besides, Ashoka got his message inscribed on rocks and pillars, instructing his officials to read this message to those who could not read it themselves. So this was also one of the jobs of these Dhamma Mahamattas, that was to read the message of Ashoka that was inscribed on the Ashokan pillars and on the rock edicts to the people who were not literate and those who could not read it themselves. That was to spread his message. Ashoka also sent messengers to spread ideas about Dhamma to other lands such as Syria, Greece, Egypt, and his son Mahendra and daughter Sanghamitra to Sri Lanka. So, guys, this is quite a significant aspect that we see, that Ashoka greatly responsible for the spread of Buddhism outside of India. He had sent his messengers and preachers of Dhamma to places like Syria, Egypt, and Greece, and also to even he sent his son and daughter, that is Mahendra, his son, and Sanghamitra, his daughter, to Sri Lanka to spread Buddhism over there. He built roads, dug wells, built rest houses. Besides, he arranged for medical treatment of both humans and animal beings. So we see that aside from the spread of Dhamma, he also was involved in a lot of infrastructure building across the empire, that is roads, wells, and rest houses. And also he provided for medical treatment of his subjects, including humans and animals. Next, we see that the Ashoka's message to his subjects. Now, this story is basically, this story talks about being a good-natured and good-principled human being. So the several principles that we see, or the messages of Ashoka, these are common messages or common principles that a decent human being follows, such as treating all creatures with compassion, giving gifts to Brahmins and monks. Um, one thing is important, that it is both wrong to praise one's own religion or to criticize another's. Each one should respect others' religion. If one praises one's own religion while criticizing another's, he is actually doing greater harm to one's own religion. So this part is quite significant, guys, because it talks about religious harmony. So we see there, so we see that another aspect of these Ashokan inscription can be found from this part. That is, Ashoka tried to reconnect the people of different faiths who used to live in his kingdom, and in today's time also these teachings are very useful and practical. That is, he says that one should not just praise one's own religion while criticizing another's religion, and if someone does so, he is actually doing more harm to his own religion. Therefore, one should try to understand the main ideas of another religion and respect it. So we see there here the concept of uh, that is trying to understand the other religion and sort of embrace the differences and learn to respect the differences. So this point is also quite important. Below the Brahmi script, the most modern Indian script have developed from the Brahmi script over hundreds of years. Here you can see the letter A written in different scripts. So the letter, you can see that this is the early Brahmi script. So the Brahmi script was the ancient script from which different modern scripts have slowly developed. So a script is basically the written form of a language. So if we when we speak it, it is spoken form and it's a language, and when we write it, we use symbols, and those symbols form a script. So this is the word A or A in the early Brahmi script, and from these we see the Hindi Devanagari script. Then in the Bengali, O is there, the is also in the Hindi, and then in the Malayalam and Tamil. So these are, if we look closely, these are somewhat similar because they all evolved from this early Brahmi script letter. So now we come at the end of this chapter. Let us see the keywords quickly. The keywords are empire. It is a very large kingdom that covers a vast land area and comprises of different types of peoples and groups. So capital is the capital city from which an empire or a province is governed. So a province is the subdivision, we can say, of an empire or a large kingdom. The Dhamma is basically the Prakrit word for Dharma, and it was the Buddhist inspired ideas, peaceful ideas that were propagated by Ashoka. And messenger was the person who used to carry message from one place to another. These were, royal messengers of the king, and we saw the case of the religious messengers that were sent out by Ashoka to the other countries. And then there is the officials. These are the officials who are in charge of different aspects of running the empire, like taxation, administration, uh, the military, army, trade, agriculture, and so on. So the important dates: the beginning of the modern empire is 2300 years ago. Um, these exercises, we can try a few of them out. So let's do them. Make a list of the occupations of the people who lived within the modern empire. So this one you can try, guys. Is about, as you know, the agriculturalist, herders, craftsperson, hunter gatherer people, and so on. You can make a list of all those. Let's do the fill in the blanks. Officials collected dash from the area under their direct control of the rulers. So this would be tax. um, Then royal princes often went to the provinces as provincial governors. PG, provincial governors. The modern rulers tried to control dash and dash, which were important for transport. So they controlled the roads and the rivers. So they controlled these two for transportation. People in the forest region provided the Mauryan officials with forest produce. That is forest produce. It included firstly elephants, then the different fruits, herbs, animal skins, different animal parts, medicinal plants, and so on. So let's do these true and false. Ujjain was the gateway to the northwest, so this is false. Taxila was the gateway to the northwest. Chandragupta's ideas were written down in the Arthashastra, so this is also false. It was the ideas of Kautilya or Chanakya. These two are the same person, these are just two different names that are given to him. Kalinga is the ancient name of Bengal, so this is also false. Kalinga is the ancient name of Orissa, that is coastal Orissa. Coastal Orissa. Kalinga is the ancient name of coastal Orissa. Most Ashokan inscriptions are in Brahmi script. So yes, this is true that most of them are in Brahmi script, but in some cases Ashokan inscription are also in the other scripts, such as in the Aramaic script is there, the Greek, in some places Greek script is also used. So this is for the people who used to live in the particular area. So the next question answer, you can do this guys on your own. So we come at the end of the chapter. So if you have any problem or any suggestions, you can write them in the comments, and so try out the exercises on your own, and we will meet in the next chapter. Thank you guys.